And we're following two devastating natural disasters today. One of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit Puerto Rico has left the entire island without power. Maria made landfall this morning in the southeast coastal town of Yabucoa as a Category 4 storm with winds of 155 miles per hour. The bankrupt U.S. territory is battling its second hurricane in just 2 weeks, with fewer resources and federal support generally provided to U.S. states. Meanwhile, hundreds are dead in Mexico after a 7.1 magnitude earthquake struck yesterday. We have team coverage on these stories. Marina Portnaya in our Miami studio and Ashlee Banks in the newsroom. Marina, let's start with you. Hurricane Maria has killed at least 9 people in the Caribbean before even making landfall in Puerto Rico. What's the latest on the ground there?
Well, as you mentioned, as of this afternoon, the entire island of 3.5 million people was without power. This came just hours after Hurricane Maria made landfall. Puerto Rico's Office of Emergency Management Agency says at this point, anyone with electricity is using a generator. Video captured the deadly hurricane ripping roofs off structures, shattering windows, and tearing doors off hinges. In the capital of San Juan, palm trees were stripped, streets flooded, and buildings were damaged as the storm passed through. The Category 4 hurricane is the first one to hit the island since 1932. According to the National Hurricane Center, as of 2 p.m., Maria had weakened to a Category 3 with maximum sustained winds down to 155 miles per hour. Now, based on air pressure measurements, meteorologists say Hurricane Maria is the third strongest storm to make landfall in the United States. Meanwhile, Irma just pummeled the island 2 weeks ago, reportedly causing as much as $1 billion in damages and knocking out electricity to 1 million residents. Officials expect Maria to cause long-lasting damage to the people of the island and the island's infrastructure.
And this is as Puerto Rico has spent years trying to dig itself out of a financial crisis, a $78 billion debt debacle. How much of a setback will the island face now with Hurricane Irma and Maria wreaking havoc?
Well, this is going to be a huge setback. We are talking about a very poor island that's been in a depression for a decade. The territory's infrastructure has gone neglected for years as the Puerto Rican government has struggled to deal with the debt you mentioned, the $74 billion debt to bondholders, an additional $50 billion pension fund obligations. In May, the island filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. Unemployment in Puerto Rico is around 10%, double the national average. These hurricanes are hammering an economy that cannot take much more. The problem is Puerto Rico very much has its hands tied. It doesn't have the same laws as other states or cities like Detroit, for example, that can file for bankruptcy in the same way. Puerto Rico is trying. It's trying to negotiate its payments, but at this point you're dealing with an island that owes so much money out, and the bondholders don't want to forgive any of the debt, and it is squeezing the people of this island.
A horrific situation indeed. It's fair to expect Puerto Rico will ask federal officials for a relief package like Texas did, for example, after Hurricane Harvey. Isn't that right, Marina?
Well, Puerto Rico doesn't have any voting representation in the House or the Senate. So essentially, the U.S. territory does not have elected advocates in Washington to lobby on its behalf the same way that Texas does or Florida does, 2 states who have just been hit with these hurricanes. So Puerto Rico is at a disadvantage. You know, we allow the people living in Puerto Rico to vote in the primaries. They can't vote in presidential elections. We allow them to serve in the U.S. military. But here they don't have any representation on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. that can help them in the aftermath of these horrific natural disasters.
Some points which definitely deserve more attention there, Marina. Thanks for breaking them down. And unfortunately, from one climate catastrophe to another, today the death toll from Mexico's powerful earthquake now stands at more than 200. At this very hour, emergency crews are pulling victims still buried beneath the rubble in Mexico City, the epicenter of yesterday's 7.1 magnitude quake, the deadliest recorded in that country in 32 years. Now over to RT correspondent Ashlee Banks in the newsroom. Ashlee, what can you tell us about what's been happening south of the border?
Well, Anya, like you said, a 7.1 magnitude earthquake struck central Mexico Tuesday afternoon, toppling buildings and killing more than 200 people. Amongst the damage were torn gas mains that sparked fire across Mexico City and neighboring towns. Today, Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto declared 3 days of national mourning and called for a state of calm.
I have instructed that the IMS and the ISTE hospitals, government-run hospitals, lend medical services to the entire population no matter what. I have also instructed the MX plan, Mexico City Emergency Plan, is operational, and it incorporates our armed services, as well as the Mexican Navy, and in coordination with the authorities, I have also instructed for lights to be placed so that throughout the night we may continue to care for people.
Right now, emergency crews and volunteers, including 500 soldiers and Navy Marines, are searching for trapped survivors who may be in offices, apartments, and school buildings. After the quake, crews including firefighters, police officers, and volunteers arrived to a 3-story school and found the bodies of 21 children and 4 adults. Pedro Sereno, a 29-year-old doctor, entered the building in search of survivors and described the scene, saying, quote, "We managed to get into a collapsed classroom. We saw some chairs and wooden tables. The next thing we saw was a leg, and then we started to move rubble, and we found a girl and 2 adults, a woman and a man." The search continued well into the night, and early Wednesday morning, several other children were rescued and brought to safety. According to Mexican authorities, 30 others are still missing from the building. Also during the quake, a church collapsed while Mass was in progress, killing 15 people. The church was located on the slopes of a volcano which had a small eruption right after the tremor. A fireman at the site of a collapsed building had this hopeful message.
Despite the tragedy, we have to say that it wasn't as bad as we thought due to the movement. There are 30 buildings that collapsed like this one, among buildings of several stages and houses, and we have firemen in all locations.
Tuesday's quake is the second deadliest quake to rock the country in 32 years. Ironically, Mexican residents were taking part in a drill commemorating a 1985 earthquake just hours before the most recent quake struck. The 1985 earthquake had a magnitude of 8, killing 5,000 people and injuring several others. It caused serious damage to Mexico City. And just a couple weeks back, the country saw an 8.1 magnitude earthquake. However, the damage was less devastating and fewer casualties. So far, there have been more than 11 aftershocks in the state. The strongest one has registered as a magnitude 4. Many world leaders have vocalized their support for Mexico, and Rome Pope Francis said he's praying for the victims, the wounded, their families, and the rescue workers. U.S. President Donald Trump said in a tweet, quote, "God bless the people of Mexico City. We are with you and will be there for you." In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sent a rescue team per Mexico's request to aid in any way possible. Sadly, the death toll is expected to continue to rise as emergency crew continue combing through the rubble. The U.S. Geological Survey predicts the final death toll will be 1,000, and the economic impact will be between $1 billion and $10 billion.
All right, Ashlee Banks and Marina Portnaya following some very tragic circumstances for us. Thank you so much.